All right, hey there, welcome back. We've had a little bit of a break from these live sessions, but we're back to talk to you specifically about the Swift Student Challenge for WWDC 2021 this year. The deadline always comes up very, very fast. In fact, it's Sunday. So if you haven't started working on your Swift playground, you probably want to start it now. As you can tell, that's our alarm dog telling me you better get coding. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how with a Mac you can set up your own Swift Playground book that you can potentially submit to the Swift Student Challenge. So let's have a little look. All right, so the very first thing, this is what we're talking about, this Swift Student Challenge. So if you're older than 13 in the States or 16 in many European countries, you'll be able to submit your own book to Apple and get all sorts of accolades. It's a really great honor to be picked as one of these Swift Student Challenge winners, and the quality of the submissions every year is always super, super high. All the details are here. I'll put the link in the description of the video later. In fact, I'll put it in the comments while we're talking now as well, so you can go check it out. So let's copy this over here, and we'll paste it into our chat here. So if you want to go off and apply, this is where you get information about what it is you need to do. And what we're going to talk about, like I said, again, specifically today, is building your Swift Playground book on your Mac. Tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be back and we'll talk a little bit about how you might build it on an iPad if that's all you have available. But for now, we'll stick with the Mac for today. So a few years ago, Apple came out with something called the Swift Playground's author template. It was a project you could open up in Xcode. So we'll get a little bit of an introduction to Xcode today if you've never seen it before. You could build and run your Swift Playground and also use storyboards like you might be familiar with if you're taking the Develop in Swift curriculum. And you can test out what your playground is going to look like without having to build it, copy it over to your iPad, run it on the iPad, and see what works and what doesn't work. So let's go off. So what we're going to do is we're going to go off to, at this stage, hopefully you have Xcode downloaded already. We're going to go to developer.apple.com/download/more. Now I've already searched for Swift Playground's author in here, so I'm going to paste this into the chat. And I'll be having a look at the chat in a little bit just for questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I can talk through anything you might want to talk about with regards to your own Swift Playground book. And then maybe tomorrow we can build a more interactive session where a few of you guys could show off what it is you're working on, and if you have specific questions, that we can try to work through those problems. All right, so I pasted in the URL that we went to. You just go to the More Downloads page, you type in Swift Playground's author template in there, and you'll see there are quite a few. So I'm going to be using Xcode 12. So that's the one I'm going to download. So I would just tap on this item over here to download it. Now I got a 413 forbidden because I haven't signed in a little while. I've just been sitting on this page. Now, luckily, I already downloaded this. I opened up the disk image that downloaded, and I have it opened up on my desktop. So what you'll see in the end is this playground book template.xip. So I just dragged it to my desktop, and this is what's inside here. So we've got an acknowledgement file and our template. So this is what we're going to be working in, is this template folder here. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff here, and luckily we can take a look at what's in here by double-clicking on this playgroundbook.xcode prod. So I'm going to open that up now. So we had a good question. What is a playground book? Is anyone applying or have applied to the Swift Challenge this year? Cool, we have a couple people who've applied. So a playground book is something that can run in the app, the Swift Playgrounds app. So that's an app that's available now on the Mac desktop as well as on your iPad. So let's actually have a look at that. So we're going to open up the Playgrounds app. So some of the Playground books you might be familiar with are the Learn to Code series. And you'll see that these are actually it's just a bundle. There's a folder and there's a whole structure underneath it. So if I open up Learn to Code 1, we can see we have a table of contents over here of a bunch of different pages that we can work through. We have these cutscenes, which are just HTML pages that kind of give you an introduction, in this case, to commands. We have issuing commands, and those are actual Playground pages where we have code and we have the live view as well. All right, that one's not coming up there. Well, this is one of our Playground pages. This is where we can enter in code, and this is where we'll have Byte come up in the live view, and we have to solve puzzles with Byte. I really like the cutscenes and the way that Apple's used them for these books, because it tells you a little bit about the concept that you're learning. So in this case, it compares functions to grouping together a series of steps to do a task, like tying your shoes. And they've done a really nice job with these books. So that's kind of what you're trying to build, is something that looks a bit like this. And we'll take a look at the structure of that in just a second when we build one with our author template. Okay, so now we have Xcode open. I don't know how many of you have used Xcode before, but this is it in all its glory. This is what you would be using to develop your own iOS and Mac and watchOS and tvOS and iPadOS apps. We have our project Navigator over here. This shows us all of the files that are in our project. We can open and close these folders and take a look at the different pieces, and we're going to do that in just a second. When we tap on an element over here in the Project Navigator, our editor pane is going to change, and it looks a little bit different for our author template. This is a bit of a different type of project than you might see if you're developing an app for iOS. So we have some targets that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and then we have our project as a whole. We have our source files over here. We can see the .swift extension, so when we tap on one of those, our editor pane changes quite a bit, and we see our Swift code in there. So that's our editor pane, our Project Navigator pane, because we have this first button selected. There are other ways to navigate the project here that we can use. The find is a useful one if we want to try to just search for something inside of our project. And we'll be looking at the Debug Navigator a little bit later. So those are two of the most important panes. Another really important pane that we're going to see a lot when we're dealing with our storyboard is over here. This is our inspector pane. And this is going to change depending on what file we have selected. So that's a very quick tour of the bottom part of our interface anyway. Up here, we can see there's a mention of a live view test app, and there's a little icon for an iPad Air. So this is the simulator that we're going to run our PlaygroundBook on. I highly recommend, when you're working with the author template, going through the README. Apple's provided a really nice README that explains all about this book in a lot of detail. And maybe it's a bit overwhelming at first. But we'll take you on a quick tour. So it just tells you about the structure of the book. In fact, let's hide our inspector pane for a second. It talks about the PlaygroundBook. It talks about some of the modules as well that we can work with, so we can start to organize our code in different ways or use other people's code in modules. We have a couple different facets of our book. This is where we see the complexity of our PlaygroundBooks sort of all laid out in front of us. When we're just copying and pasting playgrounds that are inside the Swift Playgrounds app already, we get to ignore a lot of this. So it tells you the first step. So the first steps here are, we're going to open build settings.xc config. and we're going to change a few things. So we're going to change the bundle identifier prefix and the PlaygroundBook file name. So let's just give it, we're going to do a demo project. This is not going to be very exciting. So you'll find the build settings.xcconfig down here in the config files folder. When we tap on it, we can see it's just a set of key value pairs. So here's our key. There's an equal sign where we assign it a value. So my bundle identifier prefix, I'm going to rename that to ie.thecodehub. The PlaygroundBook file name, let's call it demo book. And then the rest of it we can leave the same. We don't have to dig into this too much. Okay, cool, that's our first step done. By the way, with this exercise, you can follow along if you want. You can go back and rewatch this. We'll make it available as a recording later, just to give you an idea of what's in this template. I'm also going to give you a really good resource from WWDC 2018 where they walk through this template, an older version of it, but it's still, a lot of the steps are valid, and it's a really, really good introduction to how to use this template. Okay, so we changed our settings in the build settings.xcconfig. So now we're going to open up manifest plist.strings, and it says in the private resources group in the PlaygroundBook group. So these are the groups, these yellow folders. Here's our private resources, and I'm going to tap on manifest plist.strings. So now I can change the name of my PlaygroundBook. I'm just going to change it to demo PlaygroundBook. And we can also change our chapter names. Now your PlaygroundBook might be a book where you're telling a story and you do have a bit of a progression like Learn to Code or something like that. Or you might just be coding an experience. Maybe you're taking advantage of augmented reality on the Playgrounds app on the iPad. So it really depends how many chapters and how many pages you have. A PlaygroundBook could consist of just one chapter and one playground page. Charlie, this seems so overwhelming and scary at the same time. This is pretty heavy. But you know what? The point of this is that the time is short anyway. When WWDC was announced that we didn't have a lot of lead time, the deadline is Sunday. You know, you might have to start working on something now that you plan for next year. That we say, all right, cool, let me just get a feel for the tools, and then next year I'm going to have something amazing to show off and submit. That might be the strategy you have to take. I wouldn't kill yourself over this one. Really push yourself. I would just say, look, we're going to take it easy, no pressure. If we don't get it this year, we'll try again next year. All right, so we've changed our name in the manifest.plist or manifest plist.strings. Go back to the README. Okay, so we're only going to test this in the iOS simulator, so we're not going to run it on an iPad. I don't have an iPad connected here, so we're just going to worry about this step here, where we select an appropriate team. In fact, you don't need to if you're just building the PlaygroundBook bundle and you're airdropping it to an iPad. All right, so as it says, now we can build the PlaygroundBook target, and it'll result in our PlaygroundBook as a product. So let's have a look. This is not going to be super exciting. This is what it means by the target. So we have a book core target, a live view test app, a PlaygroundBook target, and then a user module and a book API. So the README will explain what all of those do, because they all serve different functions and they build different artifacts from your code that you've written and the groups of resources you have. What we're going to focus on today are two of the targets, the live view test app and the PlaygroundBook. So we're just going to select PlaygroundBook. First, we can leave our simulator as the iPad Air 4th generation. And I'm just going to hit Command B to build. I could have also gone up to the product menu and gone and hit build, and it would do the same thing. Okay, so I have a message over here that says PlaygroundBook succeeded. That's great. I have a little yellow triangle. That's never great. Okay, it's just telling me to update to the recommended settings. I can ignore that for now. But we're not seeing a lot of results. What did we just do? If we go down to the very bottom in our project navigator, in the products, we're going to see that we've got a few things. We have a libbookcore.a, libbookAPI.a. They all look very fancy. Our LiveView test app.app. But this is what we just built, our demo book.playgroundbook. This is going to be the thing that we airdrop to our iPad, or we open up in Playgrounds on the Mac to test out and see how well our Playground book is looking right now. This is also going to be the thing that you would submit to Apple for the Swift Student Challenge. So I'm going to right click on this, or I can control click on this item here in the project navigator, and I'm going to choose to show in Finder. We're going to have a look at what a Playground book is. So you can see I have my fancy icon telling me that it's a Playground book. It's not that alarming. If I double click on this, I have Playgrounds installed on my Mac. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to open this. And it did, and I've got this text over here that says LiveView. I've got a little bit of code in here. Now, I haven't done anything yet. The only thing I edited was the name of this file, so it's called demo.playgroundbook. So we're going to go take a look at where this code is actually implemented, so we can start playing around and entering in our own code and then testing it out before we get to this stage where we have to open it up in Playgrounds. We also have a module called shared code, where we could drop some stuff here that would persist across every page. And we have our two tabs. So if you're not familiar with Playgrounds at all, this is what it looks like on the Mac. It looks a little bit different on an iPad, but not too different. And this is where we could write our own Swift code here. So we have another constant defined there called name, and we've given it a value of hello world. We can run our code, and it's not very exciting. We have our little preview at the side that tells us what Swift evaluates on each line. So if we tap on that, we'll see that we have the value hello world stored in a constant. If we tap on this one, we have the value hello playground stored in a constant. So not too exciting just yet. So that's what it looks like when we open it up. Another thing you can do, if we go back to the Finder, is we can either right click on this or go to the action menu and say show package contents. Now inside here we're going to have a few folders. We've got the edits folder, we've got the contents folder. We have the edits folder because I started writing code inside Swift Playgrounds, the app. But in the contents we can see we have a chapters folder, we have a manifest.plist, we have a modules folder, private resources, and user modules. The one we're going to focus on for today is going to be this chapters folder. You can see in there we have a chapter 1.playground chapter. If you tap on that, it's just another folder. It's got a manifest.plist. It's got a pages folder that has a playground page .playground page folder. And inside there, that's where we finally get to our code. So we have a main.swift. If we scroll down, we can see that that's where our let's string str equal hello playground is, along with some extra stuff. And then we have our LiveView code as well. So we're going to go take a look at that in just a second. So really, our Playground book is just a folder with other folders inside it. And there's a very definite structure. And inside the README, if we go back to Xcode, it talks about that structure. Now we're going to ignore the new auxiliary and user modules because that's a little bit advanced for us today. We're just starting out with this template. I do recommend going to the Swift Playgrounds authoring documentation. I'll post that link both in the chat and then in the description after this. So we're going to skip through that one. We're going to skip through deleting an auxiliary or user module. We're going to skip renaming an auxiliary or user module since we're not touching them, and adding sources to them. So this is useful if you want to add images or anything like that to your Playground book. Adding book level private resources is going to be useful for you because that's where we're going to drag in our images. We'll make sure that it's a member of this copy bundle resources build phase, so we'll take a look at that in a sec. And these are the ones we're going to focus on. So adding chapters, pages, and just content in general, and then testing the live view. So there's some advice down at the very bottom of the file, and that's the stuff that we're going to focus on for today. All right, so first things first, we have our book content. Now, one way we could look for that source is we could go to the Find Navigator here and look for let str equal, because that's what showed up in our main.swift file. And that will let us navigate to our Playground page. And you can see that this shows you where you are in the project. So we went into PlaygroundBook, chapters, chapter 1. So the whole same folder structure that we just opened up a second ago. I'm going to go back to the Project Navigator and show you that. So we have our blue folder here, chapters, chapter 1.playground chapter. We have a manifest.plist that we're going to look at in just a second, and then we have our pages underneath that. And there's our Playground page with the content inside. So if I wanted to add something like that constant that I added earlier, so maybe I don't want to say hello world, maybe I want to have this be a constant that shows up on that first page every single time. I'm going to say let name equals Matt. So that'll show up for everyone who opens up this Playground book. I'll save that. I'll hit Command B to build it. Build succeeded. I can go, if I don't have it open still, I can go back to that demo book at the very bottom inside my products folder and hit Show in Finder to see it. And I can open that up. Now we have some edits for our existing file, so what I might need to do is I might need to go back to, especially on the desktop, go to Window, My Playgrounds, find that one and delete it. So let's see. We don't have our demo playground here. Let's close that one. Let's close our Learn to Code, and let's try opening that up again. It'll ask me, am I sure? If you don't see that, are you sure? You may want to check to make sure that you reloaded it. All right, so I tried to add my edits to the new code that I added in the book, or in the project itself, in the template that I'm working on in Xcode. So it gives me an error, and in fact I can see that the error is here. If I undo that, the error is that I've got two constants named name. So this red dot is for, so it's saying name previously declared here, and this is the one that I've redeclared. So I either need to give this a different name or give this one a different name. Let's call that name 1. So now we can see that changing the code inside here, this is what our players are going to see when they're playing with the playground. So we can add lots of different things in here. We could use like a turtle graphics thing. This is where we could write commands for byte. Depends on what other code we have lying around in our Swift Playground and inside the modules. Okay, cool. So we have our let name equals to Matt. This is our live view.swift. So what this is doing here is, this is part of the nice glue that comes with this Playgrounds author template. This instantiate live view function that we call will go off and load a storyboard and assign that to the live view for our Playground's current page. And let's play around with that, because so far what we're seeing in the Playgrounds app is just this. It just says live view. That's not very exciting. So let's add a little bit more interactivity. And this is one strategy you could take for showing off your work to the folks at Apple. Because you can't build a whole app and have them install it on a device, you might be able to build a sort of an app light in your Swift Playground. So let's take a look at that. So I mentioned storyboard a couple times. Now hopefully you're familiar with storyboards. If not, we'll take a look now. So far we've seen the project editor over here, and we've seen the source code editor. So we added some source here. We can see that Swift or Xcode gives us some autocompletes here, which is really handy when we're writing out code, because we don't always remember exactly the syntax of what it is we're writing. So it's nice that we have some stuff outputted for us with the syntax all laid out for us. So that's the source editor. The other thing we're going to do is work in this. This is the interface builder mode. So we tap on that. We're going to make this a little bit bigger. So like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to answer them as best I can. I know this is very overwhelming. When you go to build a Swift Playground book, you might be thinking, okay, well, I've played with Swift Playgrounds, I've played with Learn to Code 1 and 2. This is a really big leap, because now you're dealing with Xcode and like an app development workflow. That's a lot of stuff to take in. So we'll work through this. I'll show you the video from Grace and Holly from WWDC 2018. It's really, really good. They do a good job walking you through it as well. And hopefully we'll come back tomorrow. If I can't answer any of your questions today, I'll try to answer them again tomorrow. We'll try to jump on at the same time. But for now, we can see in here we have a view that looks a lot like our live view. So if I go back to my Playgrounds app, I can see there's my live view. It's kind of boring. It's just a plain white view with a little label in the middle. I can tap on live view and it'll show me how it's aligned on the page. It'll also show me that it's a label. If I tap on this button up here, it'll show the inspector pane. And now this is where it gets a lot more interesting, because now we can play around with things like the font that we're using. So maybe we're going to change that and make it a bit bigger. We could use headline. It's a little bit bigger. We could go down here and we could change the colors of the font. So let's go do that. Let's change. Maybe the system gray color. Maybe that's not a great choice. Let's do red. It's always a good one. Sort of eye-searing red. That's a bit better. We can change the background. Let's change the background to blue. That shows us that we definitely have something on the screen. Now I get some notes here about my auto layout. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually just going to delete my constraints for a second. I'm going to tap on this item here, and we can change the alignment of our font, so we can have our text centered inside this whole rectangle we've defined for our label. And what we're going to do is we're just going to build a simple little view that someone can interact with. We're going to add a button that someone can press, and when they press it, this is going to change to congratulations. Nice and simple. It's kind of a basic app development thing. So let's work through it. So we have our label, and in fact, I'm going to use constraints. So I'm going to make sure it's centered horizontally and vertically in the container. So I'll just tap on this little button down here. This is our auto layout. So this is very important when we're building apps for phones and iPads and other devices with different sizes. Not maybe as important for Swift Playgrounds, but it is very useful to make sure that no matter which way a person rotates their iPad, your content is going to look like you intend it to look. So I'll add those two constraints, shrank it down, that's fine. Now we're going to add a button. So to add a button, I'm going to go up to this plus button here in the toolbar. Hit the plus button. You can see we have a list of a whole bunch of different things that we can add to our user interface. We're going to add a button. We'll add it right below our live view. And in fact, I want it to stay right below our live view, so I'm going to just control click on the button and drag up to our view. And this may look like complete gibberish to you. I'm just going to say, do you know what? I want it to be this distance away from that live view label above it. That's all I'm telling it to do. And then I also want the button to be centered inside the view. So let's go back to this menu here. We want it centered on the horizontal axis. So here we're going to center it there because we've already defined where it's going to be vertically. It's going to be very close to the live view label. And we're just going to add that one constraint. Now we want people to push this button, and when they push the button, we're going to change the text that says live view right now to say congratulations. Not very exciting, but it's a start. Now first off, we probably want to give it a useful label, so we're going to change the name of this button from button to something else. So we can go over here in the Attributes Inspector, and you can see we have other options. We can tap along here. This is the Attributes Inspector. This is the one we care about. Here's the title. I want to change that to, we'll just change it to congrats. So we have an idea about what it's going to do. Oh, good. So we had a question. So which software is this? This software here is Xcode. You can go to the App Store and download this. It's available for free. So you just go to the search bar and say Xcode. And this is what you want to download. We're working with the latest one, so Xcode 12.4. And you can use the Swift Playgrounds author template for version 12.2 with this just as well. All right, so we have our button, we have our label that was already defined for us. We just changed some of the attributes for it. Now what we need to do is we need to hook them up. So when someone touches that button, we want it to do something. And this is nice because this is exactly how you build an app. You know, we're actually working in a PlaygroundBook is what's going to be the ultimate result. But it's the same. This technique that we're using now is the same that we would use if we were building an app. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show the assistant editor to help me out a little bit. So I'm going to go up here. There are all these lines at the top of our screen. If I tap on them, I can go choose assistant. And now I could have also gone up to the editor menu here and chosen assistant. Now the author template has a little problem figuring out what should go in this assistant here. So we can help it out by going over here and hold on, our live view. controller. All right, so what we've done is I did Command-Shift-O, is if I'm looking for something and I know what it's called, so it's called Live View Controller. I can do Command-Shift-O, which is quick open. You can also get to it over here. Open quickly. You start typing in and it will autocomplete for you. So I could have typed in Live View Controller because I knew that that's what it is I'm looking for, that's behind the code that I'm going to work with when I'm working with my storyboard. So I can tap on that one. All right, so I'm going to reveal that in the Navigator by right-clicking here and saying Reveal in Project Navigator. And I can see that it's in my bookcore.playground module in my sources. All right, that's what's going to be behind this live view.storyboard. That is not what we want, so here we go. Oops. I'm going to drag that guy over there. Nope, that's not going to work for us. Let's try that again. Let's go to Assistant Editor. No assistant results. All right. Let's try that again. This file is a remote resource. All right, we're running into a couple interesting issues here. So really what we want to have is we want to have our, when we tap on our bookcore live view controller, this tells us here that it's in a module called bookcore, and the class that we're working with is a live view controller. So it's this guy here. So this is what we want to hook up to our user interface. So there was a way to get around it. I'm blanking on it right now. It's the way it goes. But what we're going to do is we're going to sort of work around that. So let's do this. So first off, we need a connection between our label and our source code, so that we have a reference to it, an outlet to it, so that we can change the value of the text for it. So we're going to do @IB_outlet. So now I've gone to the liveviewcontroller.swift file. So you can either navigate to it by going to PlaygroundBook, Modules, bookcore.playground module, Sources, liveviewcontroller.swift, or you can do Command-Shift-O and start typing in liveviewcontroller, and you'll jump to it. All right, so we have our @IB_outlet directive that tells Interface Builder that, hey, I have a property here that I can connect to the user interface. We're going to call this, actually we'll be a little more specific. We'll call this congrats label. We have to give it a type, so it's a UI label. And we have to give it that one exclamation point. So if you've gone through Develop in Swift Fundamentals, and specifically Unit 3, where you talk about optionals, this will make a bit more sense. If not, we'll just work with this for now. So we have an outlet where we can actually access the text of our label and then change it, because that's our main goal here. Now the other thing I want to do is down below here. So you notice that I did that just under this public class, live view controller, and a whole line of other stuff. Then it's inside these brackets. So you can click on these braces here, and it'll show you everything in that class. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to have something that, if we go back to our storyboard, and in fact we'll close this for a second. We have our, oops, I renamed that by accident. You can change your button title by just double clicking in there just as easily as you can by going over here to the attributes button and changing it there. We'll zoom in a little bit so we get a better view. So now we want to have an action. So when someone touches that button, we want to run some code inside our live view controller. So we'll go back to that. We'll go play with that. So we can also access it up here in the tab bar. Lots of ways to get to the same thing in Xcode usually. We have a function here where we can receive stuff from the playground as people are typing in code, but we're not going to play with that for now. Just after that, we're going to add another function. We have to give it a directive, IB action. Now we can define our function called func. And we're going to call it congratulate me. And we'll make it so that only buttons can invoke this. So that's our function. When a user taps on that button and lets go, we're just going to change the text for the congrats label. So I can start typing in CON, congrats, and you can see my autocomplete narrows it down to congrats label. I can hit dot, and I'll see a bunch of properties on my UI label. I'm going to say text, and we're going to assign it to congratulations. And it would help if I type the letters in the right order. Okay. So our function will just say congrats label.text and assign it a value of congratulations. Okay, so we're going to do something kind of fun that shows off the power of this template. We're going to actually just tap here next to the number 38. This is the line number gutter. I can just set a breakpoint there so that when I'm running my app, it'll stop, it'll pause, so I can kind of check out and see where we are. All right, so now what we have to do, we've defined these methods, now we have to actually hook them up. So let's go back to our storyboard. So it's up here, liveview.storyboard. Now what I can do is I could either do it from the view over here, or I could look at the outline of my view. You can see that I have my live view label. It's got a little L there for label. This is a button. It's got a B for button. If I hold down Control and then click and drag from congrats, you can see I get a blue line starts popping out from my button, and I can drag it up to my book core live view controller and release it. And when I release it, I get a few options here, some segues that we're not going to get into today. We get into this sent event. So congratulate me with sender. So let's tap on that. So now that means that they're connected, so that when I tap on that congrats button, it's going to call that method. And I can see that that succeeded, that they're actually connected, because now it actually doesn't look like anything. By going over here to my inspector, and the very last one is the connections inspector, and I can see that on my touch up inside, which is the event that you want to handle. So when you touch down on a button and then release the finger, when you touch up, it's going to send this event, and it's going to call that method, the congratulate me with sender method. And you can see that it's connected. If I don't want that connected, if that was a mistake, I can hit the X and delete that connection. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my code, my live view controller, knows what the label is. So I created a label called congrats label, but I haven't connected it to anything yet. So I'm going to go this time from the live view controller. I'm going to hit Control again, tap and drag down to my live view and release it. And you can see that I have an option to pick view or congrats label. So I'm going to connect it to the congrats label. And you can see over on the right there, my connections changed. So I have a connection to View already. That was set up for me by the template. I have this received action connection that I just set up. And now we have this congrats label connection as well. So let's see this in action. So to see it in action, we could build it, go find the PlaygroundBook in the Finder, open it up in Playgrounds, and try it out. But that gets a little bit tedious after a while. So the real beauty of the template, the author template, is that we can go up here to the targets and pick the Live View Test App. Now I can change and say instead of an iPad Air, I want to simulate one of these other iPads, but I'm happy with an iPad Air. I'm going to hit the play button over here. Just like I hit Command B earlier, you could do the same thing and hit Command R to build and run. It's going to launch the simulator. Time to get a cup of tea. All right, and after a little while, up it comes. So I've got my congrats button. Now maybe I need to think about the sizes here because it's a bit small. But I've got my live view label with the funky new colors. I've got my congrats. I'm in the simulator, so I can go and play around with things like I can simulate Touch ID. I can play around with maybe attaching a keyboard. I can rotate the device. So rotate it left, rotate it right. I can simulate a shake, the home button. So I can pretend that I have an iPad Air 4th generation. And here, we're gonna go back to the app. When I hit congrats, this is where that blue check that I said earlier comes in handy. So this is, now we're in sort of debugging mode. So you can see that I've got a nice green, everything's good because I've got a green label here. I've stopped at this line. If I drag up from here, this is our debugging view down here where I can take a look at exactly what's going on. So if I look at self, this will show me the congrats label, so it's actually connected to something there. I can see the UI button that sent me this event. And if I had a lot of complex code and I wasn't sure where a bug is, and there's a really good section on this, a lesson on this in Unit 1 of Developing Swift Fundamentals. I could step through the code and see when it actually broke on me. So it's not breaking on me here. I just was curious to see whether or not that function was actually going to get called. Now, if I was just testing it out to see if it gets called, I could actually tap on that to disable it so it won't stop here every single time. And I can resume by hitting this play pause button. That'll push me back to the app, and I can see that my congrats button did. It changed the text. Now that's all it does. It's just keeps setting the text to congratulations over and over again, which isn't very exciting. So maybe there's something more that we want to add here. The really cool thing about this is you can actually build out an experience inside your storyboard with your code and your live view controller Swift file. So in here, you can write a whole bunch of code to do some kind of clever stuff, whether it's with augmented reality, whether it's with machine learning, you name it, image processing. And that's the experience that you can submit to the Swift Student Challenge for Apple. So in terms of writing code, that's one way you could do it, and you'll be able to build and run it and test it out. And then when you're ready and you say, yep, I'm happy with that, I'm going to stop that in the simulator. I'm going to go back to PlaygroundBook, go up to Products, and hit Build. I'm going to go to the Project Navigator. Down at the bottom, I'm going to open this one up. So right-click on it, show it in the Finder. You can see it's got that name that we gave it. I'm going to test out whether or not I've changed my live view by closing the one that I had open, and then I'm going to open this one up. It's going to ask me if I want to open it. Yep, I trust it. It's me. So we take a little while to load over here. And here we have our code that we can interact with. And when I tap on that button, it changes the contents of that label to congratulations. So this is a great way to build a sort of an app light for the staff at Apple to go and judge and see whether or not you've got a compelling enough submission for your Swift Student Challenge. So that's about an hour of a long slog through Xcode and building your PlaygroundBook. I'm going to show you one last thing where we can add additional pages. Because so far, this code here and this live view over here is not really connected. And we won't get to that today. But if you wanted to add an additional page to your PlaygroundBook, I'll show you how you can do that. And again, if you had any questions, feel free to drop a note in here. I know I'm taking a look now. We still have that overwhelming and scary, and it definitely is. It's a bit intimidating, but just a bit of practice, and this all be a lot more intuitive once you get through it. So we saw those manifest.p lists inside our PlaygroundBook structure. And those are going to be very important because they define how Swift Playgrounds is going to display your content. So we have a few of them. So in fact, let's close some of these folders here so that we get a bit more clarity. We'll close the live view test app because we won't use that for now. The first manifest p list we care about is here. And I'm going to send you some links at the end of this. We'll put them in the description for where to go to read up more about these manifest.p lists and the keys that you can use in them, because each one has a key and then a value. So we can change our PlaygroundBook name there, but we've already done that in the, remember our step earlier? We had our manifest plist.strings. That was in private resources here. So we have PlaygroundBook name. We changed it here, so we don't need to go change it in this manifest.p list. It'll get changed for us automatically. But this is where we want to focus right now. So we have a chapters item inside our p list. And it points us to chapter1.playgroundchapter. So that just tells Swift Playgrounds to look for a folder called chapter1.playgroundchapter and look for a file in there called manifest.plist. If this is all Greek to you, I'll send you the documentation and it explains what all these files are. But basically the manifest.plist is really just, it's showing us the structure. It's telling you, hey, look, this is what the book is supposed to look like. This is what features it might have. So we have a supports dark mode feature turned on here for this particular playground. So this is pointed to chapter1.playgroundchapter. So if we look down here in our chapters folder, we have chapter1.playgroundchapter. Okay, that checks out so far. If we tap on the manifest.p list there, it's going to tell you about the structure of what that chapter should look like. So here we can give it a name. So let's give it a different name. So my first chapter. And we have a list of pages. So right now we only have playground page, .playground page. We'll need to add another one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the plus button. So when I mouse over item 0, the plus and minus buttons show up. By default, it is telling me that it's going to be a string, so I'm just going to type in a bunch of characters here. We'll keep it short. p2.playgroundpage is going to be the name of our second page. And we'll save that. Now, all this is doing is just like the previous manifest.plist that we saw. This is just pointing you to the next folder to go looking for a manifest.plist file in. So it's saying for this first one, playground page, it's looking here, that playground page. There's a manifest.plist file. We've got a name for chapter 1, page 1 name. We'll call this start. Live view edge to edge, and then live view mode. So you can decide to say, hey, I don't actually want the live view mode. It's all going to be about just coding in whatever code I've written in the coding view. Or maybe I do. I want the live view to be visible right away because I've done some interesting stuff with the storyboard. Now I'm going to have a small problem here because I've added a page in the manifest.plist up here in my chapter, but I haven't added the folder with that manifest.plist in it just yet. So let's take a look at what's going to happen, what's going to break here. So we'll hit Command B to build it because I'm in the PlaygroundBook target. Let's go back to the Finder and check it out. Actually, let's first close our book here. I can go back to the Finder. There's my demo PlaygroundBook that I've just built. If I double click it, I'll open it. It'll ask me if I want to trust this to be opened. I'll say yes. And it's telling me that it expected to find a folder called p2.playgroundpage, but it didn't find any. So that's the last thing we're going to do today. So we're going to add that second playground page. So we'll hit OK. It'll close it for me. Now the way to add a playground page, the easiest way, is to go here. We're going to show you the whole structure. We'll right click on chapters and do show in Finder. Now I'm inside my project. So earlier we opened up our PlaygroundBook.xcode project. Here's the PlaygroundBook folder inside there. This is the template that I downloaded. If I tap on chapters, I can see the manifest.plist, so I can actually edit it here outside of Xcode. The main benefit that this template gives you is that you can run it in that live view test app target. Here's my chapter 1.playground chapter with the pages folder, so we'll tap on that. And this is the one that we have to create in here. We have to create a p2.playground page folder. Now the easiest way to do that is to just go up to the action menu and hit duplicate. So we'll just create a copy of the other live view we had, because then we have everything in there. We have a live view.swift file and a main.swift file and a manifest.plist. So if I hit return, it'll let me rename that. Now we called it p2.playground page. And now let's go back to Xcode and sort of finish this off. So I'm just going to close that and open it again. I might need to give Xcode a little bit of a shake to make sure that our new folder shows up. If it doesn't show up, we might have to close Xcode and then reopen the project. Let's try changing our navigators and coming back. Nope, it's not going to refresh for us. So tell you what, we're going to close the whole project. Now we opened it from just up here, so we'll swipe over, open up our PlaygroundBook.xcode project. Now normally Xcode reads that. Anytime you change anything on the disk, it'll read it properly. It didn't today, even when we reopened it. So all right, what we'll do here is we'll go to our pages folder. We'll hit Command Option A to add something. We're going to add our p2.playground page. Just going to select that folder and hit open or add. But we're not having a lot of luck with that one. All right, well, let's show you the alternate way to do it then. Cool, so we go back to the Finder. We just added this in the PlaygroundBook. So we'll keep the live view the same because we want that same congratulations button to show up there. Main.swift, let's double click that and it'll open it up in Xcode. And instead of name, we're going to delete this. In fact, we're going to delete the let string equals hello. We're going to create a Boolean called did we finish our project. So that's going to be the code that we see on the second page that we navigate to. You can see in the background whatever I did opening up that main.swift file, it tickled it and it's now got my p2.playground page there. So maybe you have to play around with another project, make Xcode jealous in the other project, and it refreshes the list. We can tap on main and we can see that the code that I just edited in the other window has showed up here. And the very last thing we're going to do is we're going to change the manifest.plist for this page. So it's just the information about this page. So we'll tap on manifest. This isn't start anymore. We're going to call this one end. We'll leave the other settings the same. Again, you'll see a lot of the keys that you can add here because there are other values that you can add other than just name and live view mode. So now we've got our p2.playground page, our playground page.playground page. We'll hit Command B to build. We're on the PlaygroundBook target. I'll go back to the Finder. And the folder where I had my demo book being built, I'll open that up. We'll open it. We'll say open, great. So now you can see that we have two pages, start and end. Our live view still works. We haven't run our code yet because there's nothing really to run here. There's just a few constants we've defined. We can tap on end to go to the last page and it says, did we finish? I'm actually going to set that to true. We can run our live view just like we did before, and it changes the text to congratulations. So this is a way to build your Swift Playground book. There is a lot to building Swift Playground books, and it can seem really daunting because there are a lot of different pieces, and we flew around different pieces of the Xcode user interface. But feel free to drop a note, either leave a comment on the video with questions, shoot me a note, either through the codehub.ie or through YouTube. And maybe we can try to come back tomorrow and address some of those questions just to get you set up and ready to go if you really are aiming to submit your Swift Student Challenge for Sunday. All right, I hope this was useful. I know it was a lot to take in. There's a lot of flipping around. Stuff doesn't always maybe work the way you expect it to because the author template is a little bit different than building an app for an iPhone or an iPad. But hopefully you were able to get a taste of the structure of the book, which is the most important thing. And tomorrow we can maybe show you some other ways to author a book and get a leg up by using one of the already pre-written books. Maybe like Learn to Code 1 or one of those. All right, check out the links in the description. Hopefully we see you back again, do the whole like and subscribe thing. And yeah, we'll see you soon.